his shadow faced the wrong way. Your mind knows how the world is supposed to look, and that can be used against you. It's like how you can read an essay over and over without noticing a misspelt word. Your mind fixes it for you. At times, it fixes things too well. There are tens of thousands of miles of desert beneath the rain shadow of the Sierra Nevada. It is surrounded by civilization. You've all heard of Vegas and LA, but there are other population centers. Lesser-known cities crowd the borders of the desert, some with populations reaching into the 100,000s. With this amount of human activity, one would be led to believe that the desert is mapped and explored, its secrets revealed and mysteries uncovered. Do not make that mistake. The desert is primeval. As you drive deeper and deeper, you'll notice the towns growing smaller until they are nothing but groups of buildings and trailers huddled together, boasting a store or two. And when you pass those, there is nothing. Golden sand stretches to the horizon, broken by mountains of jagged stone cut smooth by the wind. It is huge, the kind that the human mind struggles to comprehend. I imagine the people that lived here before, long before cars or planes, could have thought this was the entire world. I came to traversing the desert roads quite by accident. 3 years into college, I found myself low on cash, but not lacking in free time. So that summer, through my ecology professor, I landed a paid internship studying plant life in the Mojave Preserve. With nothing better to do and rent fast due, I signed up immediately and left the following week. My temporary home for the next months was to be a house in the little town of Baker, owned by the National Park Services, so I believe it was 5 hours away from university at San Luis Obispo and 3 hours from my parents' house in LA, on a good day. After the novelty of my internship wore off, I found life on the edge of civilization to be rather boring. The boiling heat kept you inside most afternoons, and there was hardly anything entertainment-wise. After sunset, I began watching the stars instead. I ordered myself a book on astronomy and began memorizing so many constellations the ancient Greeks would have been proud. More often than not, I drove home on the weekends and sometimes even back to school to catch up with friends. It wasn't the shortest drive, but believe me when I say there was literally nothing better to do. It was on one of these drives when everything began to go wrong. On a weekend in late June, I promised my old roommates that I would be back Saturday for a get-together. Even though I finished work late the day before, I was determined to make the drive. I stocked up on food and coffee, and according to my calculations, I could make it there just before midnight. I hit the road early in the evening and did my best to zone out. The desert looked beautiful at sunrise and sunset. Between those times, however, it grew repetitive. Hill after hill and bend after bend, it all looked the same. I snapped out of it a little over an hour into the trip when I saw him. A hitchhiker in an army green shirt and cargo pants ambling down the side of the freeway. When he saw me, he stuck his thumb out desperately. Normally I do not stop for hitchhikers, especially somewhere so isolated, but this was a little different. The heat of the desert during June is the kind of temperature that can kill someone, and there seemed to be no one else but me. I wasn't going to let him into my car. All I had to do was roll down my window and see if I could call help for him, maybe toss him some food and water while he waited. I slowed down and pulled over. He was old, probably nearing if not over 60. He didn't look to be in too bad shape. His clothes were clean and he hadn't been sweating much, which made me think his car must have broken down a short distance ahead. Just before my car came to a complete stop, I looked out the passenger window at him, and I saw his shadow. It was directly behind him, just like the sun. I felt bile rise up in my throat as my heart rate spiked. To this day, I don't know why I had such a visceral reaction to something as simple as a shadow. It just felt so wrong, something my mind could not process, so all it could do was tell me to run, and I did. My foot was on the brake 1 second, and in the next the gas was on the floor. I briefly glimpsed his frustrated expression as I peeled away from the roadside and down the freeway. The image of that moment remained. For the next half hour, I tried to reason away the fear gnawing at my chest. It must be the heat. Maybe I hadn't been drinking enough water. I could be going crazy. It is funny how your brain does that, how it tries to convince you you're insane because it doesn't understand. It works too, because by sundown I was feeling a little guilty about how I left that man on the side of the road. Logic dictated that I go back and try to help him, yet a raw fear kept me from it. Some German philosopher wrote about these feelings some centuries ago. That some deeper sense lies beneath your logic and reasoning, the will to life, he called it, which trumps all other emotion. So in the end I did not go back. I pulled over and called the police instead. It was illegal to walk on the freeway. They would go look for him, and as long as they found him before sunrise, he would be all right. I hung up the phone and took a moment to compose myself. Everything would be fine. By sunrise tomorrow I will be drinking coffee with my friends by the ocean. I relaxed my muscles and took several deep breaths. In and out, in and out. I slumped backwards and let my hands fall from the steering wheel. They tapped the blinker and flashed my high beams. There was someone standing in front of my car. I didn't scream. I couldn't even breathe. I don't know how I managed to throw the car into drive, but I did. I swear to God I was planning on running him over, that same hitchhiker in cargo pants and a green shirt. But in the last second his eyes reflected my headlights. They did not look malicious, just tired, very tired. I couldn't do it. I swerved left and barely missed. "I'm trying to help," he shouted as I drove by, but I paid no heed. He continued shouting as the distance between us dragged ever longer. "Damn you!" he screamed as he sprinted forward. "Look around, it's all wrong." I watched from my mirror as he disappeared into the night. The land was flat, but his voice seemed to echo. I tried to forget what he said, I really did, but it was no use. I began to pay close attention to everything, to all 5 of my senses. First it was the sound of the tires along the road. I drove over rocks and sand and potholes, but the noise just sounded the same, and then it all started to unravel. Everything just seemed wrong. The sand was too smooth, the moon was too round, the road was too straight. How long had I been driving? I really was going insane. My breathing became ragged and my hands shook so badly I could barely keep the car straight. Finally I gave up and hit the brakes. I didn't even bother pulling over. I closed my eyes for a bit and tried to calm myself. When I opened them again, I looked toward the sky instead, at the stars. This time I really did scream. The constellations were gone. I don't mean that I couldn't see the stars. I could see all of them in the night sky, but all of them were wrong. It was as if someone had scattered them like salt across a table. There were no patterns, no groupings, just nothing. I couldn't see Scorpio or Cassiopeia. Even Polaris in the north was gone. I screamed again. That scream, looking back now, saved my life. It was loud, but before it reached its peak, it cracked like a faulty record player. Not naturally, as your vocal cords do, the sound seemed to break for a moment and then started louder again. Somehow, in the swirling mass of confusion that was my mind, I had an idea. I've tried to think of many ways to explain it, and the best one is not very dignified. Whatever illusion this was, it was almost like a video game. You do too much and it isn't smooth anymore. It begins to break and lag. Overload it enough and it crashes. I siphoned the gas from my car into various coffee containers I had emptied out. I took them off the road into the desert and the fields of creosote shrubs. In the wildfire prevention course I took, they said these burnt most beautifully. I emptied every last drop of fuel into the brush. With a prayer I dropped the match. They lit up like the sun. The flames engulfed the gas-covered shrubs and spread across the field. They danced high into the night and twisted around each other in thousands of tiny ribbons. The smoke rose too, and the shadows licked the dirt. Around me the world began to fall apart. The moon and stars faded away. The sand lost its color. The fire, as it grew, began to look more and more wrong. Slowly it lost its colors until it was a mass of red and orange, but it wasn't enough. Whatever created this world was going to struggle until the end. I began to jump and scream, trying to push it over, but it held on like a drowning man to driftwood. Suddenly there was someone standing beside me, someone with a green shirt and cargo pants. He looked at me, then towards the fire, and he understood. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a slip of metal, a harmonica. He brought it up to his lips and blew with one shrill blast. Everything shattered. I woke up at the mouth of a cave. My limbs were heavy and the light stung my eyes. With shaking legs I pushed myself up and took in my surroundings. I was circled by bodies, all of them shriveled and unmoving. I felt the bile rise again, but I was simply too tired. My body had given up. Among the corpses there was a movement, and I stumbled towards it. He was laying there, his clothing much more tattered than when I saw him on the road. His arms were thin and shriveled. I saw his bones jutting from his skin. He could have been 100 years old. The hitchhiker's eyes met mine, and his chest began to contract as he made a painful gasping sound. Laughter, I realized. He was laughing. After a few moments he stopped and laid his head down gently. Smiling, he died. He had been here too long. The sleep had kept him alive. I looked down deeper into the cave, and I felt what I could only describe as an ancient malice. Some old master of a younger world, a god from when we used to worship the trees and stones. Yet I felt a weariness too, an old and aching pain, a dying animal that had long outlived its time. When I began to limp out into the sunlight, the walls and ceiling began to shake and groan. A rumble came from the darkness below, but that was it. It could not stop me. It was too weak. Of all the emotions I could feel, what I did not expect was a twinge of pity. Humans feel pity for the most wretched things. I don't know where my car was. I don't remember leaving it. They found me walking along the freeway with nothing but the clothes on my back and a silver harmonica. They tell me I had been gone for 3 weeks. I said I pulled over to investigate a rock formation in the distance and couldn't find my car again. They don't believe, I can tell, but what else is there to say? I did not go back to the internship, found a job in town instead. It has been years since then, and I've never stopped thinking about it. About the fire climbing high into the sky, the death throes of the grand illusion, the shrill sound of the harmonica. I don't know what it wanted. Maybe it fed off the mere presence of us. It had fought like mad to hang on to us, that's for sure, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Der Wille zum Leben, they called it, the will to life.